Look, on Leadership Now, I promised never to do commercials, but here we are. Why? Well, I have a new book in the works. It's coming out spring 2026, and I wanted to give you an advance heads up about it. The title, The Future of Work is Gray, and it's kind of a big deal to me because the book dives into the age crisis that's reshaping work as we know it. It's something that I call age debt, but spoiler alert, it does turn into some solution. There's some hope, there's some positive, and that's called the experience dividend. So if your workplace still thinks that age is a liability, well, it's time to retire that mindset. In fact, we might want to retire the word retire. So yeah, I don't do ads. This is a special occasion, and for it, I am willing to go gray. And maybe Grey Goose will sponsor me, not sure. Anyway, spring 2026, the future of work is gray. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Now with me, Dan Pontefract. Am I ever excited? I mean, I'm a kid at the candy store today. Dr. Richard E. Clark is with us today. He goes by Dick. Dick, a short intro, and then we're going to get into some serious conversations about learning, performance, CTA, AI, you name it. I'm sure we're going to dig into it. So who is Dr. Richard E. Clark for those that don't know? Well, first of all, the word trailblazer comes to mind. In the fields of ed psych, instructional technology, this individual has left a career, an indelible mark on a career on how we think about learning, expertise, performance, organizational capacity, etc. He's a professor emeritus at the University of Southern California. Dr. Clark has spent decades, literally, blending cutting-edge research with practical applications to elevate the way individuals and organizations ultimately achieve their potential. He's a prolific author, globally recognized expert. Dr. Clark has written numerous books, can't get to all of them, but some of them include Turning Research into Results, Learning from Media, and ultimately, some of his still to this day groundbreaking cognitive task analysis research has transformed the way how we capture and transfer expertise. His work has been cited literally tens of thousands of times, reflecting its profound impact on education, neuroscience, and leadership development. A keen focus on evidence-based practices, Dr. Clark challenges you and me in the conventional wisdom, pushing leaders and educators to embrace what actually and truly works here in our organizations. His illustrious career, he's been celebrated countless times, accolades everywhere, the Thomas F. Gilbert Distinguished Professional Achievement Award, the USC Faculty Lifetime Achievement Award, it goes on. He's a prestigious fellow, including the American Psychological Association and the Association of Applied Psychology. Honors like these underscore ultimately his contributions to both research and practice. And he's still at it. That's why I want to chat with him today. He continues to lead the way. We're going to get into a good discussion about CTA and artificial intelligence and how that can revolutionize expertise transfer, how neuroscience is reshaping our understanding of motivation and problem solving, and how anyone really can overcome the perceived limitations to achieve mastery in any domain. So, Dr. Clark, I'm a recovering chief learning officer. I've looked up to your work for years. What an honor this is. If we start first, bigger picture, panoptically, and we think about how organizations still these days in 2025, they cling to training strategies that are ultimately familiar and intuitive, but they don't produce, meaningful results. But your research over the years has consistently called attention to the disconnect between popular pop culture myths and what actually works. So let's just big picture here. In your tenure and looking back, maybe even for the last decade as you see what's happening, what are some of the still prevalent myths in performance management, in leadership development, in training and learning that's still causing the harm in these organizations that's keeping you up at night?
Actually, I think you and I might make a similar list. I remember reading about one of those myths in one of your books, that wonderful Open to Think book that you
Yeah.
have, which I learned a great deal from. And that is that multitasking does not work. In fact, it makes things worse in performance. There's reasons for that, which we can talk about if you like, but basically all the evidence points in a different direction. It says, don't even try it. It's not possible. And when you do try it, it distracts you and you don't really perform nearly as well as you would if you didn't do that. If you took it slower, take task by task, switch off a task. If you want to switch to a new one, it's more important, but don't try to do the impossible, which is perform many tasks at once. Um, Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like in the you've been obviously you've been around for a while. We didn't have social media. We didn't have the distraction technology that is so prevalent and pervasive. And so, I don't know your family situation, but I have a 20, an 18, and a 17-year-old, and Denise and I, who's also an educator, continue to push this notion that folks, kids, put the phones away. You've got to focus. And you have to be one dimensional, not multi-dimensional in where your attention span is. So between where we were with a lot of your research and a lot of your teachings, but to today, like where are we at, sir?
I think what we've learned is that one of the most important human skills for learning and for problem solving and for creativity is to be able to focus, to
Hmm.
be able to control our attention and not be distracted. As a matter of fact, there's the evidence for that is becoming just overwhelming. There's a huge amount of interest in it in psychology internationally today. And the evidence is that if you allow yourself to be distracted, you break up whatever task you're attempting to accomplish and so on. Media then, obviously, the internet provides a whole lot more distraction. Games that are immediately available if you get a little bit frustrated, if you are not happy with how things are going, if you're not really interested in the task that you're performing, the distractions are huge and very attractive. And I think that's a real issue now.
So
By the way, this would almost be a good conversation for a much longer discussion
it,
because there's a lot of evidence about how to help people develop better focus skills, about how to help them avoid distractions and to make their ability to control their own attention, their own persistence at a task much more effectively than they have been in the past. We've
there's
all done it. We've all been distracted. It's not something that only happens to a few people, but the amount of it, and particularly when you're performing important tasks, it makes you so much less effective and efficient.
where does the blame lie? Who's the culprit? Is it societal devolution, so to say, or is it leaders not paying enough attention to the fact that, we are, if you believe pop culture research, having the attention span less of a goldfish? Where is it that we should lay some blame, sorry, but then obviously there's a flip side to that is, well, what can we do? So where are we at with that?
I actually don't think people are very aware of how distractible they are.
Mm.
So much of, I think what we misunderstand, and maybe it's all of us, is that so much of our minds are automated. So much of our daily behavior is totally unconscious. We might actually talk about some of the systems that help us focus because there's brain systems, I think, that really do make a difference here. But basically, anytime we fail to keep strong attention on a task, our minds automatically switch us into a kind of a default mode, which is never, never land. Whether it's the internet, with a game that we play, whether it's thinking about something that happened yesterday or is going to happen tomorrow, whatever it is, we're not on task anymore. So the number of distractions have increased dramatically, and people's understanding of this process by which we become distracted is not actually catching up to what we could understand and could control.
We feel like then perhaps we're a bit like the metaphor, the frog in the boiling pot, where we may not know we're actually boiling, which is sad. So again, where is it that we get the guidance to jump out of the pot? How does this happen in today's society?
Well, where does guidance happen to begin with? Because there are strategies that help people avoid distracting themselves. One of the interesting things is that it actually a lot of it focuses on something that all of us have kind of rolled our eyes at, and that is meditation.
Ah.
It turns out that mindfulness meditation, which is something that's very easy to do, if it's done like 10 minutes a day, and if it's really done carefully, it dramatically can increase your ability to control your attention. And I didn't believe it. One of my sisters is a psychologist, and that's one of her areas. She urged me to try it, and I did, and it has made a difference.
Hmm.
I'm not nearly as inclined to become frustrated in a task and let that frustration cause me to be distracted.
Well, that actually demonstrates your cognitive agility, Dick, in terms of how you believe that we are all in us has the ability to be lifelong learners, to have that aptitude to fuel the learning to be different, to choose to develop the muscle that is both cognitive and ultimately perhaps emotional and psychosomatic. So tell me a bit about then how is it that we think that, or you think that we can be lifelong learners, and what are the opportunities to strengthen that cognitive muscle that we're missing out on?
You know what persuades me personally, and really this is a value issue, a value question for almost everyone. What is it that you value that would be protected and enhanced if you become a lifelong learner? And to
Mm.
me, it's that your brain doesn't decay nearly as fast. As you get older, your memory starts to go a bit. A lot of things change cognitively.
Mhm.
But the more you work, the more that you struggle with challenging cognitive tasks, those that you have to actually think about, to invest effort in, not just things you do quickly, but the things that take time. That is the thing that your brain continues to use as a source of, I guess, robustness is a good word.
Mhm.
Um, I'm 84. And I noticed changes in my cognition. I noticed my memory's not as quick as it was. But the moment I tackle a long project where I really have to think carefully every day, the more I actually recover in some ways. And I think there's some evidence that suggests that that's the case. So bottom line, it's self-preservation, I think. Literally.
So if we meditate and we are apt to fueling our cognitive capability by testing it, by almost pressure cooking ourselves into new ways of learning and tackling new ideas of learning, what are some of the tactics, I suppose, that you suggest that individuals as they enter their 50s and 60s and 70s can do to actually fuel that muscle we're talking about?
Well, I think it's really important to be clear with yourself about what interests you the most. I actually personal values are so critical to
Mm.
motivation to do what we're talking about here. It takes time, it takes effort. There's a lot of other things that can distract you. And by the way, I have chosen to continue to work at what I was doing for most of my professional career. I think other people might choose to do something else, might choose a hobby and go into it deeply and really start learning and developing and so on. And whatever it is, it has to be something that you value enough and that excites you and rewards you enough that you're going to persist at it. If
Guess
there
it goes
isn't
back.
anything out there that interests you, then find something.
Well, it goes back to perhaps always making sure you have a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, because if you don't have that, arguably you're not going to be attracted to learning new things. So that's that idea of, well, what do I stand for? What are my values? Dick, as you point out, if you're valueless or meaningless or purposeless, it's really hard to get jacked about learning something new.
Truly. I don't think there's many people out there that are valueless. I actually just think there are people that don't think carefully enough about what they do value.
Uh,
And by the way, it doesn't mean that they don't do what they value. It means that they haven't thought about it. They haven't reasoned about it. They haven't looked back at what they've chosen to do when they had choices. They haven't looked at it for the patterns in the decisions that they've made to come to a conclusion of what kind of things really fascinate me. Um, I'm fascinated by research. I'm fascinated by evidence. I'm fascinated by looking at the difference between what we know from very careful work that we've done on the one hand and what our common practices are on the other. That's what gets me up in the morning and gets me excited. Um,
well, I'm excited to tap into some of your cognitive task analysis. of recent years because perhaps, when some of your seminal research was being performed, there wasn't really mainstream artificial intelligence. And so these days, with AI being literally at the fingertips of um, any of the big tech companies that have ability to provide that for us, whether it's Stanford and their brainstorm or a storm application, whether it's
Mhm.
ChatGPT and so on, right?
Mhm.
So I want to get into something here that's a bit selfish, but if I play this out for a second, hopefully it makes sense. I'm in the midst and throes of writing a book that's called "The Future of Work is Gray," and its principal plot is we have a society demographically that is aging because we're not having enough babies as we used to in the past. And even though there's immigration in North America, at least, it's sort of delaying the inevitable, which is happening in Japan and South Korea and Germany, which is the workforce is aging. And so there is potentially the growing risk of expertise and knowledge and intellect and I guess yeah, tacit learning. So some of the pieces that sit there exiting the workforce. And so what I was curious about from a cognitive task analysis perspective and where AI comes from is this perhaps a compelling solution? So before we dig into that, I'd like you to first define for viewers and listeners what exactly is cognitive task analysis, and then we'll dig into some of the facts there that might relate to the workforce and its aging and loss of expertise.
Cognitive task analysis, a quick definition of it would be that it's an interview strategy for capturing from top experts exactly how they do what they do so completely, so effectively, so reliably, and it captures it with about 98% completeness. There's still a little bit there that we haven't learned exactly how to capture. We can talk about that if you wish, because I think we know what we're doing now. But basically, it does it so much better than the experts do themselves. When we ask experts to tell us how they do something, they leave out about 70% of the decisions they make and around 40% of the performance that the things they have to do in a step-by-step fashion. And so cognitive task analysis is designed to increase that from the 40 or 60 or 70% up to 100. It takes time, which may be one of the reasons why it is not used more extensively. But when it's used, it's just amazing what it accomplishes.
So
Um,
this is there's my fear, right? So my fear is as workforces age and either folks are not sticking around, they're retiring early or just retiring for that matter, we have certain industries that require that tacit knowledge for things to continue to work, and whether that's water supply, whether that's energy, what doesn't really matter. A lot of these blue collar jobs, as you can see in the research, I'm sure you've done this, Dick, is skewing older. And so, do you think then that first of all, CTA as the opportunity to capture this tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge so that for once and for all, we've got a bank of the information and intellect that allow us to understand how some of these jobs are performed if whatever the percentage is, 40-ish percent, is not even ever documented. It sits upstairs in someone's brain.
in our attempt to validate one of the many systems that we developed, we actually tried the most complex expertise that we could imagine, and we tried to capture very simple. For example, on the complex side, we worked with surgeons, capturing surgery and then having the experts that we interviewed teach half of the surgical residents in a medical school. And
Uh,
I taught the other half with an MD who was not a surgeon and the using cognitive task analysis. And the cognitive task analysis was twice as effective as the surgeons who trained the other half of the residents that had come in that year. Um, they learned, these are physicians, by the way.
Yeah, not
So
dumb
they're
people, right?
not,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
they're very serious people and very focused. They learned 35% faster with the cognitive task analysis. They learned between 40 and 45% more in about 40% less time.
Wow.
And they made no serious mistakes. It's a matter of, there's a legal requirement to report all problems in surgery. So we knew that was the case. Um, we actually developed a training system for patent examiners in Europe. This is not a simple job. It was when the European Union was putting together the European patent examination process. And patent examiners that were trained as a result of cognitive task analysis learned 75% faster. We found that we could train them in 6 months rather than the 2.5 years that they were currently being had for training. They performed 200% higher than the people that were not trained with cognitive task analysis, and they made 60% fewer mistakes. We had this happen over and over again. The surgeons got so excited about it, they appointed me a professor of surgery. I still have a professorship in surgery, which I not only don't deserve, but I don't talk about it very much. Uh, Surgeons that are experts want to work in surgery. They don't want to teach surgery. And I think that's true of a lot of experts. They're asked to teach over and mentor over and over again, when in fact they may not need to do that. And when they do it, they may not actually do all that great a job. So it's a loss of their time. The impact on an organization is not very positive when they become trainers, and you're better off to use this cognitive task analysis. What's prevented it in the past to some extent, I think, is that it takes a lot of time in these interviews, and it takes special trained people to do it. But if
Okay.
AI
So
can do it,
exactly, that's where I wanted to go. So
that's
now,
where I'm going, because that's where we're all going. My team is now working on teaching ChatGPT to do cognitive task analysis. And what we found out is that ChatGPT already knows how to do about, I would say, 60% of cognitive task analysis.
well,
You have to ask it to do it that way, but it can, and it does. And it quickly learns anything that you teach it to do. Um, it's a long process. We think it's going to take us at least another year before we have a viable system, because we're going to have to test it once we develop it over and over again to make sure that it works. But this means all you have to do is put your experts in front of AI, and when AI finishes interviewing them, then have it design the training and present the training that AI has captured from the expert,
so
and
you're
assess it also.
you're effectively you're expediting the elicitation of the expertise. You then are cutting down the time in which ultimately it needs to reformat into training material to delivery, et cetera. And then you're also throwing in an assessment of sorts or an evaluation that allows you to assess how good it's going, how well, I suppose, it's been inferred. And that in and of itself is going to expedite the overall shift from tacit knowledge to some sort of applied or explicit knowledge.
Yep. Not only that, but there's another benefit here we don't talk about very much, but it's becoming much more important with the evidence we have lately, and that is it tells us what prior knowledge people need before they're trained to become that expert. In
Oh,
other words, what does a physician actually have to know, or an intern in medicine, in order to become a surgeon, in order to take the training that's developed as a result of the interview with a surgical expert and any other area? Turns out that prior knowledge, like things like facts, concepts, processes, principles, things that knowledge that surrounds this expertise that you're going to develop, that's different between people, and you have to make sure everybody has enough in order to begin learning to become an expert in something. And that knowledge about that information about prior knowledge is naturally collected when you do a cognitive task analysis. What people haven't done is develop those what are called prior knowledge tests. But basically, they're both entrance tests into the training that results from a cognitive task analysis, and they're also they can produce a list of what these people need to learn before they take the course in how to become like
Hmm.
the expert that they want to mirror.
So I guess it could be the mother of all delta gap analyses that's done pre, but then it also could, if I'm hearing you right, Dick, could it provide tailored or customized learning path because not all learning needs to be done the
Oh,
same way based on people's intelligence or competence level?
every path would be tailored. Every trainee's path through training would be tailored by the AI. And by the way it's tailored would become more and more sophisticated as we test the system, as we find out who learned what, who performed in what way afterwards, and so on, and feed that back into the system and adjust it.
Hmm.
Um, I don't see that we'll have actually all that much need for training people in training. This is one of the jobs that may disappear. And we're talking about what is training going to, what is AI going to replace? I think actually AI is going to be a lot more effective trainer with CTA as a background. One additional benefit here that we're beginning to see is that one of the things that's prevented the use of cognitive task analysis is that we don't have a lot of good measures for expertise that is valuable in an organization. Who
What do
knows
you mean?
who's an expert?
Yeah, what do
Well,
you
what
mean by
evidence do
that?
you have that somebody's actually an expert? I mean, are we collecting the kind of evidence that we trust when we say this person has expertise in a certain area enough so that we should try to capture how they do it? Do we know the variety of tasks that they've struggled with, the amount of time and effort, what uh, what what uh, um, what skills they've developed, and how they generalize them to new situations, and so on? And that's not true of a whole lot of key jobs in organizations, I think. And this will make it much more possible to do that. In other words, to have a more, I think of it as a more valid measure of a greater variety of types of expertise that are important to organizations. And the organization itself can decide what that is and can have that CTA system actually take a look at different people and what they know and begin to identify experts whose knowledge you may want to capture and use in the future.
So how does this benefit, or perhaps maybe a better question, Dick, is from a human resources, HR, people and culture, talent, futures perspective. So I'm thinking ahead again now to an intergenerational workforce where older workers like you and me are going to be coveted by organizations to stick around and continue to play a part somehow. But also, HR and people and culture leaders, the C-suite themselves, have to be thinking about the giant puzzle that is the talent puzzle over a period of time. And so where I'm going with this is, as any for-profit organization needs to think about, it's sort of a P&L, right? It's like, how do we improve our efficiencies and effectiveness so that we can gain better, ultimately profitability from the revenues that do come in? And so what I'm asking you, I guess, is if you're an HR leader or a C-suite leader, how does this help you in a future where we have five, perhaps six generations in a workforce so that we can expedite or provide a similar kind of thinking from the performance of the organization?
You know, this is going to make it so much easier for people to gain expertise, even multiple kinds of expertise if they wish in an
Mm,
organization. It's also going to make it much easier to define the boundaries of all kinds of expertise in organizations. How
mm.
far has it gone? What kinds of issues can it deal with? What kinds of problems, what kinds of tasks are not now very effectively handled? And that then, to me, becomes the HR's concern would be how do we locate the people and give them the resources they need to develop new extensions of different kinds of expertise, to be more creative, to think of the next step in an area. That's what excites me, is that an organization can build new expertise rather than invest so heavily in the development of existing expertise over time with employees who invest a huge amount of effort and time to do what they could do in so much less with an AI-based CTA training system.
Okay, so you're sitting around the C-suite table. You've been brought in, Dick, as a extraordinaire expert when it comes to CTA, AI, and sort of the talent equation we're talking about here. So, what's the two or three things that you're saying around that boardroom table that that organization, those senior leaders need to be either thinking about, if not doing, over the next year?
I would be very concerned about whether first of all, there's a variety of CTA systems out there, and I think that we're not the only group that are trying to develop an AI version. So I would be looking to see what's out there that could be used or
Mm.
might be available to be used fairly soon. And think about ways to modify these systems because they'll be modifiable to fit larger organizations. I
Hmm.
think each organization might have very different requirements, but all of them need expertise. All of them would benefit from expertise gathered and transferred very efficiently and effectively. All of them would benefit from having resources now that could be switched into developing new dimensions to expertise or new kinds of expertise in the people that are in the organization. I would be thinking carefully about trying to implement this as soon as I could.
And why?
Why not increase the success of your tasks? Increase the number of people that can solve problems while decreasing the investment of money and time in achieving those goals, and the number of errors that are made, and so on and so forth. Why not? I mean, uh, if you really accept the data on this cognitive task analysis, you'd have to come to the conclusion that it is at least twice as effective as what we're doing now, and probably would cost about a third as much, maybe less.
Mm.
What's not to like about those numbers?
So the tangentially, I want to sort of slightly stay on this, but ask it slightly differently. When we talk about Dick, your research and the work on kind of universal learning and this idea of the conditions to enable an individual through to the entire organization to be universal learners with one another. What do you see as the organizations and leaders that are getting it right? And then what are the again the flip side, of course, like the hiccups or the impediments that get in the way of making sure that everyone can be these sorts of universal learners?
Well, I do think the people that are actually developing the AI systems are thinking this way.
Ah,
Otherwise, not in the cognitive task. I don't think they've discovered cognitive task analysis yet. But
right.
I actually sense that they have, how would I put, almost invented things that are very similar to what's done in cognitive task analysis. Otherwise, we wouldn't see that the CTA or that the AI systems that are out there right now can do some of these things. For example, if you ask an AI system to discover all of the facts, concepts, processes, and principles in something that people do, or it witnesses people do, or say, or write, or whatever, they can very accurately now distinguish between these different kinds of knowledge. They don't do it typically, but they can. So, and that, by the way, we thought that was going to take us a long time to teach these systems to do those things.
Hmm.
It also recognizes procedures, step-by-step procedures, and it can record them and it can realize that these are procedures that need to be captured in some way that need to be then passed on in a fashion. What it doesn't know is, for example, that you have to interview approximately 4 to 6 experts to perform an adequate CTA. And
Ah,
the reason for that is that experts are so automated and unconscious about a lot of what they do that they can't remember to tell you, even though they want to.
which is back to the tacit knowledge piece, right? It just sits
Exactly.
there and it's
Yep.
invisible. Yeah.
So you have to interview one expert and then have the second expert come along next and look at what the first expert's done and critique it.
And they
And
almost
you
say,
have to,
"Oh yeah, I do
yeah,
that,"
hell,
right?
oh
Yeah.
no, no, oh yeah, sure, I should have remembered. We have to make
Yeah.
a big decision at that point. And this constant surveying what previous experts have done is something that eventually the AI system learns to do. Not that it may actually know more. I mean, it can search its system in these large databases and find out, has anybody else done something like this, and what was there that hasn't been described just now by this expert. So eventually these things have to be brought together. That's what's going on right now, I think, in most of these systems. That's what's not there that needs to be. And that's going to take time and effort. Um, but other than that, I don't know how long it's going to take. We're still trying to discover what AI systems know that they'd have to know and sequence in order to perform this task.
Hmm.
And we
Yeah,
also realize that we have to write some software to get it done. I mean,
well,
it's,
there's that small task,
yeah,
right?
and try to hire an AI software designer.
But it does seem though that I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's at least for me, it seems there's some worry because if an organization, its senior leaders aren't on the CTA AI train, then how are they going to dutifully capture that tacit knowledge that may be leaving the doors if again there's not some sort of coaching mentoring you know transfer of knowledge that's not CTA related like I'm thinking you're on to something here.
Well, it's possible, actually, if anybody doubts. First of all, they can look at the evidence. It's out there. And people actually, somebody last year actually took all of the studies of all the different CTA systems that had ever been done and did a meta-analysis of them to see what was the average gain and so on. So there's a lot of evidence about what is there, about what the various successes or failures of the different ones are. And it is possible to do a cognitive or have a cognitive task analysis done before CTA, before AI systems are able to do them. In other words, there are many different groups. Well, I better be careful with many. There's a few groups that actually do a CTA now. So what he might want to know, is this going to make a difference to us? Do I believe it'll happen here?
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people have difficulty accepting this data until we actually do work or somebody does work with it in their organization and they see the benefit. So if they doubt it, why not consider having somebody come in and do a CTA for them on some key position in that organization? What they need to have is 4 to 6 people that are performing at very high levels in that area.
Gotcha.
So we're
Okay.
talking about big organizations.
You've been gracious with your time. The wisdom is overflowing. I have one last question if you still have some time, and that's about conditions. So you're such a proponent. Your research suggests that we can embrace learning at any stage, any age, any time. And however, in organizations, a lot of the data inside of and the research inside of the organization suggests that either there's not the time and or the culture that has been created to espouse any stage, any age, any time learning. So how do we overcome this, Dick? I mean, again, as the recovering chief learning officer and you being the Yoda to all of us, if you will. I want to understand from your brain and your experience, how do organizations and leaders overcome this facet of culture?
Reluctance, are you saying? How do they overcome a reluctance to take a
Yeah,
look at this?
yeah.
My take is that if they actually look at what they're spending now to accomplish whatever it is, and I do think that chief learning officers have a good sense of what that is, and what they could accomplish with cognitive task analysis over time. To me, if you're interested in saving money and time and getting there first, this is a really dramatic
Mm,
step in that direction. What's valued out there if it's not cost, time, successful completion of very large goals in an organization? The kind of thing that knowledge and motivation, because they're hand in hand, are capable of achieving.
mm.
And by the way, we haven't talked at all about motivation, but that's being built into these systems. That is assessing it and encouraging people to continue to persist at whatever it is they're learning to perform.
Well, I don't do repeat guests, but this is going to have to be one of those challenges to my own personal theory. We're going to have you on as a repeat guest, Dick, because there's several other avenues for us to tackle with you and your incredible body of research from media to motivation to more performance-based results. You're an incredible wealth and arsenal of knowledge. Thank you for this. Where can people find out more about your work other than Googling Dr. Richard E. Clark?
I actually, if they're interested in anything we've talked about, my email is clark@usc.edu. And I'm pretty good at responding and sending people whatever they ask for. I want these things to work. I want people to buy into them. I want to see them out there making things better for organizations. I'm at that point in my career. So whatever I can do to help, that is to put you in touch with other people, to send you things to read, to let you see the evidence, I'm happy to do that.
Well, you are a gem. You're a ruby, Dick. Thank you so much. Really appreciate this. And for those that don't know, Dick and I are kind of looking at each other across the Salish Sea. Unbeknownst to us, we live pretty close to each other, just in different countries, which I thought was quite cute.
It's terrific. I'm at the extreme of the Northwest. You're extreme of the Southwest.
There you go. Well, everyone, thanks for watching or listening to this episode of Leadership Now. The incredible trailblazer, the cutting edge brilliance of Dr. Richard E. Clark, Professor Emeritus at the University of Southern California, author, researcher, intelligentsia defined. Thank you again, Dick.